Imagine a world where proving who you are takes just seconds. No scanning of passports, no uploading of documents. Yet it's more secure. That is a world that Yoti is trying to create under the leadership of its CEO, Robin Toombs. Robin, welcome to TMT Talks.
Great to be here, Fergal.
First of all, I've got to ask you, the name Yoti, where did that come from?
There's a story behind that.
Go on, tell me.
So, obviously, we thought we need a good name, so we thought hard about it, and we came up with a name UPass because you would pass to get into your nightclub or whatever with your ID or your age. And we spent quite a few months developing that UPass brand, and then one of the engineers said, "It does also mean up arse, Toomsy." At which point I thought, well, that's not ideal. So UPass had to disappear into the night. And then we spent some more time and we came up with, we wanted a name which wasn't English, but did have a bit of English meaning behind it. And we came up with your own digital identity, Yoti. And we liked Yoti. We thought, yeah, people around the world will be able to say it. 2 spellings, it's Yoti or Yodi, hopefully. And then literally about a week after we bought that domain name, a lady started launching bottom-enhancing pills under the brand Yodi, at which point we thought there is no way we're going to be able to compete with that type of popular product. So we changed it to Yoti, your own trusted identity.
And as far as you know,
so far there's been no
with Yoti.
bottoms involved, and Yoti's been hopefully quite a clean brand.
Fantastic. Great story. And give me a quick overview of the company, what Yoti does and who it does it for.
Yeah, we do 2 things. We allow an individual to prove who they are, or, for instance, how old they are. And importantly, for the commercial model, we allow businesses, therefore, to gain confidence of who claims to be who they are or how old somebody on their website is.
And this is globally, isn't it?
It is global. So we have 19 million, just over 19 million now, downloads of the Yoti app, 7 million in the UK. And yes, businesses around the world use Yoti.
And how did you get into Yoti? Give me a little bit of background on you, if you like, and your journey into the Yoti world.
Yeah, journeys always, I don't think many journeys are well controlled, or certainly mine wasn't. I joined PwC as a finance accountant back in 1993. And in 1997, I met a super talented guy called Noel Hayden, who had just set up a web development business. And I was super interested in tech and how it impacted the world and current affairs. But I hadn't really got any tech knowledge and expertise. But luckily, Noel didn't kind of mind about that and invited me to join him at that web development business. We pivoted from development into online games. They became very popular. We were bought in 1999. And then we decided to set up a new business called GameSys, which became the world's largest online bingo site. And the reason for explaining that is during that period, we realized that the online identity checking system was super broken. As long as I knew your name, Fergal, and your date of birth and address, I could enter that into the website and find somebody's credit card, and then off I could go to the races. I could basically make a deposit and all the checks would go green, like Experian would say, yes, that is a name, date of birth, address match. The credit card would accept the credit card details as long as they were authentic. And there was no linkage between the two, and we thought that's a super broken system. Somebody at some point needs to fix that. We were pretty busy doing our online bingo for 20 years, but in 2014 we went to a Spartan race and there was just a big queue of people. It was a beautiful place in California, blue skies, and people didn't really mind queuing for the check-in, injury waiver liability form filling in, which was another queue, and then finally putting their ID docs and their trainers in a bag drop, which was another queue, and we looked at that and said, it's a lot of queuing. Reusable ID would be useful in that queue, but it was blue skies. We then came back to Kent a month later where it was raining, and that same big queuing experience in the rain was really, really bad. And we thought, hang on, it's time to set up Yoti. We needed one final piece of kind of confidence when we set Yoti up, because we realised there's no point doing some kind of name, date of birth, address checking system. They're already in place and they don't work. And that was that my brother basically saw on the HMPO, the Passport Office blog, and it was only on there for about a week. This was in March 2014, but hey, you can scan a NFC chip reader phone to read the NFC chip in a passport. At which point we thought, okay, that is the way individuals around the world could basically take ownership of their face, take ownership of their NFC chip passport, and basically ensure that they prove who they are. And fraudsters wouldn't be able to do that. So.
And Yoti isn't just a story, is it, of a technology company? It's about the tension between regulation and innovation as well. How do you cope with that?
It's a messy old area. You've got to be commercially successful, but you also want people to really trust that you are doing things. In our view, it's important to do things which actually really work for the individual, but obviously they have to work for the business as well. And a lot of people have kind of looked at what we were doing back in 2014, 15 and thought, you're bonkers. It's way too early to do reusable identity. One day, obviously, the logic would be that individuals will not want to keep on kind of repeatedly getting their ID docs out and whatever. But a lot of sensible people told us, that's way too early to do it now. You should just do traditional one-time only ID verification. But we kind of felt, if you really want to have a clear vision of where you want to go, ensuring that the consumer, the individual, basically ends up empowered to decide to control their identity is what any individual would like. Everyone we spoke to said, ideally, that's what I'd like, but I'm not convinced it will work out that way. Luckily, some businesses kind of came on board and said, we'll offer it as an option. And particularly young people kind of went, we'll download an ID doc onto a phone, store it, and use it that way. It's taken a longer time for more businesses and more older people to kind of get that concept, but actually now it's increasingly popular.
And on this subject of privacy versus regulation, you've highlighted that many users prefer privacy preserving facial recognition over uploading lots of personal documents. How do you negotiate and navigate that trade-off?
So we try very hard to design things where we offer choice. We always try and ensure there's privacy involved in how those methods or solutions are, the mechanics. But it is complicated because some regulators will say, we want you to store the identity information either in the business or in the ID provider records for 2 years or 6 years or whatever, and storing data, PII, even if you use all of the best encryption and whatever, it makes it very hard to reassure people that your stuff is super safe, or give them the confidence that I've actually deleted it, served a purpose, and individuals are not as worried as regulators are about audit trails. So ensuring privacy, ensuring security over a period of time, really difficult marketing messages to get right. We kind of love the fact that people who choose facial age estimation have lots of confidence that we and lots of others, partly now encouraged by regulators or even by some laws, the information's deleted immediately after. It doesn't help us grow a reusable digital identity network, but our principle number one at Yoti, which we wrote out in year one, was always act in the interests of your users. And actually, if our individuals want to use facial age estimation, even if we think we could help protect them over a wider set of ID, not just age utilities with a reusable ID, if they initially want to use facial age estimation, then that's what we let them do. And businesses like that, they want people to have the choice And over time, more people will do facial age estimation in the Yoti app rather than repeatedly on a browser at different websites. We're always working to try and ensure privacy, reusability, data minimization.
Now, one of the things you've been involved in recently is the UK's Online Safety Act, which has kept you rather busy, I'd imagine, around the requirement to verify somebody's age when viewing adult content. How has that experience been, and what has it taught you?
We've been pretty busy. We've done 900 million facial age checks over the last 6 years. So actually, a huge amount of those age checks were done way before the French and the UK introduced those new AV laws, and 15, 20 US states have also done so. But there's no doubt that in the last couple of months, a huge amount of new people have been offered the challenge or the requirement to basically pick a way of proving their age. And it's important to recognise the regulations don't say you've got to prove your date of birth. You've got to give high confidence that you are over 18 in most of these utilities. And some of that innovation, facial age estimation, allows a huge percentage of the population to basically do that without having to offer any other PII apart from potentially, some people say, a face is PII. If you immediately destroy it, contentious as to whether really you're kind of storing and holding people's PII. Our algorithm doesn't do any facial recognition. It has no concept of, trying to match a face to another match. It's just literally a series of faces from the Yoti app with months and years of birth, which ensures that it can analyse patterns in faces to basically work out that you are or are not over 18 or under 18 or a year to a reasonably accurate degree.
And it works.
It works extremely well, and there's lots of opponents who say it doesn't work, and it's just
on certain category, on certain people it doesn't work, on certain skin types.
Some people think it just doesn't work at all. It's voodoo and magic, and it's kind of Mickey Mouse. Less and less people say that. Obviously, NIST do published measurements on the accuracy, and the Australian trials have just done published accuracy as well. But there are definitely, we've never hidden the fact we publish by year of age, by skin tone, and by gender the performance results. We've done that since December 2018. Every year we publish that so that people can have an informed understanding and discussion of whether is it accurate enough, is it. Obviously, any estimation technique will never be consistent across all ages, across all gender and skin tone. But the key is it discriminatory? If it's 0.01% or 0.5% biased, most people looking at that would potentially say, well, I think that's still an effective way of doing something, and I'm going to choose to use it because I've got the informed information. If you hide all of that away and you don't admit whether there's any bias, then I think you lose people's trust. But there are people who use some of those statistics and say Yoti is less accurate for a dark-skinned person than a fair-skinned person, and therefore it shouldn't be used. I've got mixed race children and pretty sensitive to these issues, and I just think you have to be open, and if regulators think it's too inaccurate and decide it can't be used, then that's something which they'll make their decisions on. But of course they don't check humans in shops when they estimate people's ages, and humans are way less accurate doing it. They're less accurate at checking each other's gender in terms of less accurate for a gender that they are not, and the same with skin tone. And that's not because people are biased against a gender or a skin tone. It's often to do with familiarity of people, and just humans aren't very good. They're certainly not consistent at doing it. And of course the regulator would never go near trying to do tests of whether humans are good enough to do this. But of course with a computer you can measure it easily and publish it, and therefore you have people kind of question that, well, it's not perfect, so it shouldn't be used.
One of the challenges you do face, though, in this area is around deepfakes, isn't it? And I know you've spoken quite widely on it about deepfakes in the past. How are you overcoming those challenges?
Yeah, but they're a big challenge. less than a year ago, we had something like 2%, 1.5 to 2% of all of our age estimations were deepfakes.
Wow.
Yeah, which
That's a
is,
significant number.
oh, yes, it's now about 7%.
Wow.
So we're spotting more and more people who are either in the ID space or the age space, just effectively trying to inject things past the camera to beat it. It used to be that they'd hold up a piece of paper or a screen of an older person, but most suppliers now have NIST tested presentation attack detection, and nothing's perfect, but actually most people holding up a piece of paper or a screen of their granny's face, it will get detected. Injection attacks has been a real challenge for the industry. We started investing in 2020 and we brought out our now patented SciCap secure image capture and processing tool to detect deep fakes or injection attacks in January 2021. And what we learned was our R&D team said to us, we think over the next few years it will become almost impossible to detect deep fakes. So if you've got a video or a file stored on a server and then you just look at it to try and detect whether it's a deep fake, they told us that will become very, very difficult to do. And we thought, well, that's not good news. How are we going to make sure that trust can be contained between businesses and individuals? And they basically said we've got to basically detect the injections, because whenever you've got a deep fake, it's either got to be presented on a screen or on a piece of paper to a camera, or you've got to inject that deep fake round the camera. That's what you've got to do in an ID test or an age test. So we basically have invested a lot, like many in the industry, on detecting injection attacks rather than trying to work out whether a file image is a deep fake or not. There are other people doing that, but it's tough to do.
Digital identity is often described as trying to prevent something or trying to stop something, trying to stop fraud or stop people viewing certain things as well. But you've talked about digital identity as a force for good, where it enables stuff. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting area, because lots of people's experience of having to do an ID check is that they're being required to do it. They're signing up to a fintech business, or they're taking out a loan or something where suddenly the law basically says that the business has got to do an ID check, a know your customer check, or potentially an age check. And therefore, for many people, the first experience is, I'm being forced to do something which is getting in the way of me, if I'm genuinely an adult, cracking on and entering an age-restricted area, or getting on and filling in the form to do the loan. So that's not an ideal way of introducing a force for good, even if the regulator thinks it will help protect you from fraud. We've always felt that we should talk to individuals about, you should be taking control of your personal information. Your name and face is unique, Fergal, and it's precious to you. Mine is precious to me as well. And that's a very different way of looking at things. If we can encourage individuals to think, well, really, I should take ownership of that, and I can take ownership of it. Businesses will remain skeptical if they think, well, come back when you've got lots of people doing that. But they also recognise that if lots of people have got that control, fraudsters are going to have a big problem, because a fraudster cannot basically use your face, Fergal, and your passport to match in the Yoti system, particularly if you've already done it, but they don't have your real face to basically sign up to Yoti and add your passport to it. So it's a really nice system, but it will take time for people to realise individually that that's actually a sensible thing to do, rather than keep on doing a one-time only check.
And can I just say, you're not the first to say, describe my face as unique. Either. Yeah, very, very diplomatic of you there. Thank you. But how do you ensure that force for good for some of the more digitally disadvantaged in the world. I'm thinking the elderly. I'm thinking people who can't afford the technology or don't understand the technology. How do you understand that they're not disadvantaged in this?
Yeah, look, no easy answers to that one. We do, the WCAG accessibility work. We try as much as possible to make sure the app and our other services are accessible to as wide an audience as possible. We do testing of older people and younger people and less confident, digitally less savvy people, as well as digitally savvy people, to try and ensure that things are, inclusive. Things like facial age estimation is way more inclusive than people who don't have ID docs, and everyone's got a face, and although it's a choice, there's a huge amount of people in the world with a smartphone who could prove their age using facial age estimation. So there are some things which just are, because of innovation, more inclusive or open up inclusivity. But there are things like digital identities, which, that's complicated to explain to a blind person. They probably will need somebody to walk through that process with them. Yes, there are tools we can use to help them, but, sometimes people need help. I think, wider, I don't think the ID sector alone has these challenges, and sometimes, either governments have to require that people invest more time and effort to meet certain standards, or they have to sometimes provide alternatives, or require businesses to require alternatives, so that a user who's not digitally confident today can still get a service. We work with the post office, and particularly older people choose sometimes to go and use our service with the help of a post office person in a branch, even though somebody potentially younger and more savvy could complete that process at home.
Yeah, and you talk a lot about putting the power back in the user's hands, if you like, and promoting this privacy first, and protecting the information that you have on people, and their own personal information too. But how does that work in this competitive commercial landscape, which you also operate in too? And some of the skeptics to say that, as a company, that all this data that you're actually sitting on also has commercial value. And are you truly protecting everyone, or are you out there using the data in other ways?
Another tricky area. We attempt as much as possible to give individuals clear messaging as to what is going on and whether they want to consent to that next step or not. And, big businesses, professional enterprises tend to be very keen to ensure that they comply with, that type of set of principles. There are businesses who kind of say, look, that's taking too many steps and too much words, and, we want to cut half of it out and whatever, and we'll work with those businesses. But often we find actually that if you cut too much out, then people start questioning the process, or they drop out of the process, which isn't ideal. So there's always balancing facts. Some businesses may feel that, a quicker process with a bit more dropout suits them, as particularly if they're not regulated to do something different. Other businesses, recognise that more information, even if it takes a bit longer, builds more trust. So it is a difficult one. And, we learned in the Yoti app that when we tried to make it a bit too quick, some people would get through quicker, but actually we had more drop off. And as we made it clearer and clearer to people as to, we basically keep your information encrypted, but we only put that encryption master key on your phone, that type of thing. A lot of people would say, well, it's too complicated to explain that, and, just get them to sign up and you can explain that later. But actually, the more we explained to people, we got a higher and higher success rate, because people fed back to us that they think they understood what we were asking them and why, and that because it was a pretty precious thing they were doing, setting up a reusable digital identity, they were prepared to and wanted to have a bit more information about what they were doing.
Interesting. And Yoti is very much headquartered in the UK. It's based in the UK. You've got a substantial chunk of your business here in the UK. How are you finding doing business in the UK in terms of R&D, help and funding, but also just the fact of a tech business in the UK? Is it getting better or is it getting worse?
So I think there's still some important things that the UK has, which a lot of other countries are quite envious of. Like, English contract law is good, and reliable. We have some really good entrepreneurial tax schemes. The EIS, Enterprise Investment Scheme, is very good. The Enterprise Management Incentive Scheme, the EMI scheme, is good. And we have R&D tax credits, and there's quite a few things there which are important to a founder who's thinking, shall I take the next 5-10 years of pain and risk and uncertainty to start a business when I could stay in employment? And it's not the only reason why somebody would or wouldn't start a business, but clearly if you give more incentives to people or reduce the disincentives for people to take that hard kind of step, that's good news. I think probably over time, it's not as clear to me today compared to 10 years that the UK is as clearly good a place to invest. I think that's partly some of the world dynamics of the US market is absolutely huge. A huge amount of startups that succeed and scale to very successful levels are US based. There are super examples in Europe, Spotify's and whatever, who mean that isn't an exclusive way for success. But if you look at all of the stats, clearly the venture funding and the entrepreneurial spirit in America is very strong, and that market of 345 million fairly wealthy on average people is a huge benefit to startups. I think the UK therefore it's harder. In the digital space, you're worried about whether some of the big tech companies are going to come and look at an area that you might be doing and decide that they might do that themselves. I don't know if you saw, but just last week, I think you can now use Google to sign a Google e-sign document, which probably a bit scary for some of the e-signing document businesses in the world. But there's still lots of, I think, positives about the UK. I think governments sometimes need to stay out of trying to do too much, and other times they need to be very encouraging of the principles of, we do welcome startups. We do need to have regulation which is smart. I think regulation we've found to be quite frustrating. Obviously, sometimes when a regulation changes, it gives a massive opportunity for startups and scale-ups to expand and do well, particularly as they're often hungry to ensure that they anticipate that and provide the services. But if that regulation is held back for too long, for instance, facial age estimation on supermarket self-checkouts, you can't do that in the UK. That's been a massive problem to us. All of the supermarkets have said that they'd like to use our technology to do it. They did trials with the government. The science was sound, and for some reason that's not allowed. Now, our digital identity will hopefully be popular as an alternative, but if that wasn't the case, if we were just solely focused on facial age estimation, that would be a huge problem to us. For in our own core market, we can't basically offer a sensible solution to millions of people at our big supermarkets, and other people will potentially catch up, and then our kind of reward for being first mover and taking all of that risk 5-6 years ago doing it, wouldn't be rewarded. And that entrepreneurs do not want to see that you fail, not through a lack of your efforts or your smarts, but because the government blocks you from doing something useful for businesses and consumers.
And our recent plans and announcements around things like energy drinks here in the UK, and setting an age limit on the purchase of them. Is that welcome? Is that the sort of announcements you want to be seeing more of?
Yeah, I think those are good things. You need consistency. I like the fact that there's now a regulatory body which is effectively trying to ensure that different regulators apply the scientific principles in a consistent manner. It clearly doesn't make sense that you can, in the law today, do a facial age estimation on a supermarket self-checkout for an energy drink or a knife, although that might be changed because that's going to become an ID check. In reality, not an age check because of the problems of knife sales online. But it doesn't make sense to say this particular piece of science, facial age estimation, is good enough for glue, aspirin, all sorts of age-restricted goods, but not for alcohol. That science doesn't make sense, and you need government to be smart about saying, okay, that law needs to be changed. Now it is going to be changed now, but we've been waiting a long time for that to change.
And can you see Yoti therefore moving more towards the US? Maybe spending or investing more in the US market?
Yeah, we don't always explain to everyone exactly what's going on in Yoti. We try and be quite transparent for a business, both with consumers and with other stakeholders who are interested in the type of biometrics and ID that we're doing. But we've made it fairly clear that a lot of our biggest customers are global. A lot of them are US based, not all of them, and that increasingly, to be successful in the digital world, you've got to have services which work really well for more than one country. I think it's very, very hard to be successful sustainably just by being successful in the digital world in one country. It's possible, particularly if it's a complicated, bespoke legal area that you're solving. But reality is, if you want to be the next Spotify in music or whatever, you need a global audience to really love your product and want it. And so we're doing more and more in the US, and that is a really big, important market to us.
And what next for Yoti, Robin? What's coming next? What can we expect to see in the next?
Well, the first decade's
as
been
a business.
Yeah, the first decade's been hard work, and quite a lot of uncertainty as to whether we would get to the point where we now are profitable and growing well. And we therefore feel thank you. It's been a painful journey, but it's also been fun. It's really nice now to be in a position where we have more confidence that regulations are sensibly moving towards more ID services, more age services, more credential services being encouraged or even required to reduce the risk that people defraud other people and businesses. And it's a pretty competitive market. That won't change.
It is.
But I think competition's a good thing for consumers. Competition's a good thing for governments and even taxpayers. You want efficient services, whether you're buying them directly or just your government is buying them, or businesses having to rely on them. So hard competition's good. We, like you, have got some good services, and I think you always, as an entrepreneur, have to think that the glass is half full. You mustn't be rose tinted and always think that you can make a decision and it will work the right way. Things don't always do. But I do think you have to look and think, okay, well, today you might worry that Google and Apple come in and do digital ID, and you kind of Yoti packs its bag and focuses on other things that those guys might not do. But I think lots of people would say, well, you will fail if you basically just withdraw on the view that life could be tough and competitive, therefore give up. That isn't the way brilliant businesses have prospered over time. You have to have a reasonable amount of belief, and keep checking that you're actually doing the right things with customers and with individuals. And if so, keep going. Don't think that life will get too hard and kind of stop.
And what about outside of Yoti? What does Robin Toombs do when he's not doing all of this?
It's a good question. Lots of people say you can't have much time to do anything else. It's been pretty busy the last 10 years, but outside of Yoti, I've got a wonderful family. I enjoy watching lots of sport. Sometimes my kids, sometimes Chelsea. Sometimes I love watching all sorts of sports, and I also play hockey for Chelmsford Eights, which I thoroughly
Do you really?
enjoy.
That's very good, very good, and keeps you looking younger.
Very kind of you, Fergal.
And the team is Chelsea.
Yes, my team is Chelsea. At the age of 1975, I looked at the teams and thought I like lions and I like the colour blue. So Chelsea was my team. If I looked at the form, maybe I would have chosen differently. But they've been a real up and down for the first 20 years of my supporting. It was fairly, more down than up. But the last 20 years has been more fun. And actually, funnily enough, I think I like sport to be close. Even if I want one team to win, I actually want a really tense theatre of competitive, entertainment. One team beating another team by too often, too many times a year. It's actually not very entertaining. So you want your team to be up and down.
Excellent. I've really enjoyed the conversation today. Robin Toombs, CEO of Yoti. Thank you for joining me on TMT Talks.
Thank you very much, Fergal.